Picture a command bridge. No alarms, no final speech to the troops. Just a woman staring at a screen where two fleets have locked into each other like crossed blades. The Republic against the Mandalorians. Tens of thousands of lives still breathing in this moment. She doesn't raise her hand. She doesn't say a word. She nods. That was all. A nod. And the mass shadow generator woke up. What happened next breaks every number you could throw at it. Deep in the core of the planet Malachor 5, the weapon tore open an artificial gravity field that dragged everything within reach toward itself. Ships, debris, people, the light itself. Mandalorian fighters and Republic cruisers were crushed in the same fist, because the weapon didn't distinguish friend from enemy. It ate what was there. The planet broke apart, splitting into a belt of drifting rock, and in a matter of seconds, Malachor 5 stopped being a world. That's how Knights of the Old Republic 2 tells it, and the scene still sits at the back of your neck years later, precisely because it's so quiet, no triumph. Meetra Surik, the woman history would only ever call the Exile, didn't celebrate the victory. She gave the order that ended the war, and in the same breath did something worse than any defeat. Sit with how monstrous that is for a second. In a universe that stages its big moments with burning Death Stars and fanfares, the cruelest blow of the Old Republic lands without a single spoken word. One gesture. That's all it took to bury two armies. And now the whole thing tips over. By this point, the Mandalorian Wars were, for the Republic, effectively lost. The Jedi Revan and Malak had thrown themselves into the fight against the will of the Order, convinced that otherwise half the galaxy would fall. Malachor 5 was the trap meant to lure Mandalore and his clans in. The bait worked. The fleets came. And then somebody pulled the trigger. Hold on to that word, somebody. It matters more than it sounds. Because what won't let go of me about this scene isn't the destruction. Star Wars sells destruction by the dozen. What stays is the price paid by the woman who nodded. Meetra Surik survived, physically. She walked away from that battlefield while tens of thousands stayed. But in the moment all those lives went out at once, she stopped feeling the Force. Not partly, entirely. A woman born and trained as a Jedi suddenly stood in a silence no other Jedi had ever known. As though a sense she'd taken for granted her whole life had been cut out of her. The old legends explain it this way. The death of that many Force-sensitive beings in a single stroke wounded the Force itself. And Surik, standing at the center of that scream, instinctively severed the connection. Cut herself off from the Force so she wouldn't die with the rest. A reflex that kept her alive and turned her into something new at the same time. An emptiness where a Jedi used to be. She won the war, and paid for it by drowning her soul in silence. That's the first layer. A weapon, a nod, two annihilated fleets, a shattered planet, and a woman who survived by going deaf to the only thing that ever felt like home. You'd think that's Malachor told. It hasn't even started. Because the woman who gave the order didn't celebrate, and the man who built the weapon never wanted to see it used. You expect a superweapon to come from a monster, from a yellow-eyed Sith who treats annihilation as an art form, who can laugh while a world comes apart. The mass shadow generator came from a quiet man who hated wars. Bao-Dur was a Zabrak, one of the Iridonians, whose people had been ground down by Mandalorian expansion. An engineer, one of those who don't die at the front, but build behind it the things other people die by. And he was unsettlingly good. Where others saw a battle, he saw a technical problem with a solution. That's exactly what made him so dangerous. Malachor 5 was no random site for his trap. The system was a nightmare of gravitational anomalies, a smear in space where physics had already gone off the rails. Bao-Dur looked at that lethal place and thought what an engineer thinks. What if I don't fight this? What if I amplify it, bundle it, and release it all in a single moment? His generator was an amplifier for the death the planet already carried, built to stack Malachor's natural gravity into one devouring wave. Brilliant on paper, in practice, a mass grave with a fuse. And without Revan, Bao-Dur would never have built it. Revan led the renegade Jedi into the war against the Council's explicit warning. The Council said, "We see a darker hand behind this. Wait." Revan said, "While you wait, worlds burn." And he went. What set him apart from the cautious masters in the temple was the conviction that you don't win wars by staying morally clean. You win them by being willing to go further than your enemy. Malachor 5 was that logic driven to its bitterest end. Revan needed a place where the Mandalorian war machine could be destroyed in one stroke. Bao-Dur only needed the assignment. Between them, they built the guillotine. And here's the disturbing part. Nobody in that chain understood themselves as evil. Bao-Dur wanted to end the war that had crushed his people. Revan wanted to save a galaxy from a threat the others were too timid to see. Every step was reasonable. Every step was human. And at the end of that chain of human decisions stood a weapon that pressed tens of thousands of people into their own planetary crust. Bao-Dur never got over the generator. He built the weapon. It did exactly what it was supposed to do, and he carried the guilt for the rest of his life. A man hollowed out from the inside by his own work, because it functioned too well. That's the second layer. The nod on the bridge was the moment, but the machine that translated that nod into a massacre was the labor of a man who knew better and did it anyway. He wanted to end a war. What he never suspected, he had made something that would outlive everyone, including the truth about whose hand actually found the trigger. Because the closer you look, the less clear it becomes who gave the order that day. And that's no accident. Who ordered the destruction of Malachor 5? The question sounds trivial. The kind an encyclopedia should answer in one line. Date, name, done. But the sources of Star Wars start contradicting each other, and the contradiction isn't a mistake. It's the beginning of something far more unsettling. KOTOR 2 lays it out like this. Meetra Surik held command. She watched the fleets lock together. She gave the signal, the nod. Her entire tragedy, summoned before the council, exiled, cast out by the Force itself, only makes sense if it was her. And then other sources arrive and say, no, it was Revan. The novel, The Essential Guide to Warfare, several official timelines attribute the decisive order to the architect of the whole campaign. She executed, he commanded. Two official versions, the same catastrophe. Different hands on the trigger. You could shrug and call it franchise chaos, but the smarter reading, the one Wikipedia itself offers, is far more interesting. Both versions are true because neither is pure history. What we have are records, and records are written by someone. Who kept the history of the Mandalorian Wars? The Jedi, the same order that condemned Revan, exiled Surik, and never wanted this war fought in the first place. If the Chronicle assigns the blame one way and then another, that may tell us less about who actually nodded and more about how differently the survivors wanted to carry that blame. This is where this place starts giving me a genuine chill. Malachor 5 isn't even cold yet, and the galaxy is already rewriting its history. Not forgetting, not yet, but blurring. The facts start to flicker depending on who's telling them, her fault or his, in order or complicity. The truth goes soft while the wreckage of the planet is still drifting through the system. Remember the word. Pattern. What begins here in miniature will happen at this place 3 more times, each time larger, each time more final. Malachor doesn't produce catastrophes. Malachor produces forgotten catastrophes. What happens here does not want to be remembered, and that was only the first layer. What's left when thousands of Force-sensitive beings die in a single second? Not bodies, not debris. Something else, something you can't see, can't measure, can't bury, and that's still there years later, like a hole with cold air whistling through it. Legends gives it a name, a wound in the Force. To grasp how disturbing that is, you need to know what the Force is supposed to be. A net of life running through the whole galaxy. Every being is a thread in it. When one dies, its thread returns to the whole. That's the cycle. On Malachor 5, the cycle failed. Too many died, too fast, too loudly. The scream of all those simultaneous deaths tore the net at that spot. What remained wasn't a return to life, but an open wound. A tear that never healed. And Surik was standing in the middle of it. Remember she lost her connection to the Force? Here's why. The wound would have taken her with it, so her instinct cut the line so she wouldn't be drained out through the tear. She survived by making herself death, and left Malachor as something the galaxy had never encountered. A being carrying a nothing where the Force flows in everyone else. And that nothing is contagious. Out of the same wound grows one of the most unnerving figures in all of Legends, Darth Nihilus. Barely a person anymore, more a walking void. A hunger that drains entire worlds to fill an inner wound that can never be filled. Nihilus is what happens when the emptiness of Malachor finds a host and learns to eat. He's the catastrophe still running long after the planet has broken, and that's the point. Malachor 5 didn't stop when the generator went quiet. The planet was torn apart, sure, but the real injury, the one in the fabric of the Force, stayed open. A place where death no longer returns to life, but catches and keeps feeding. You kill a world and think that's the end of it, but some wounds bleed inward. And 9 years later, someone came back to drive the knife in a second time. Killing a world once isn't enough. After the first blow, Malachor 5 was no longer a planet, just a swarm of rock, a graveyard in orbit. You'd think it couldn't go lower. It could. In 3951 BBY, Meetra Surik returned, not by choice, but because everything that had gone wrong in her life had contracted to this point. In the Treyas Academy, the last of the Sith Lords were waiting. Darth Sion, held together by pure hatred, and Darth Traya, her old teacher, who had once saved her and then betrayed her. Surik defeated them both, and then the mass shadow generator fired a second time. The same technology, the same principle, the same devouring wave tore apart whatever was left of the planet. The first blow had broken Malachor 5, the second erased the remains. They finished finishing the planet. Sit with the coldness of that symmetry. The same weapon, built by the same man, fired twice at the same rock 9 years apart, and both times the job is identical. Erase whatever is still there. As though Malachor had a purpose, and the purpose was to be destroyed again and again until there's nothing left to destroy. And even then, the weapon won't let go. There's a footnote in Legends, centuries later. A cult called the Unmasked reassembled the generator a third time, intending to use it again. A strike team destroyed it in time. But the mere fact that someone dug that weapon back out of history says everything. Even as an idea, the thing refuses to die. Here, Legends ends. The planet is dead, destroyed 3 times over, gone from the star charts. A name from a 2003 video game that only the hardcore knew. Then Disney bought Star Wars, swept the old legends off the table, rebuilt the canon from scratch. And somewhere in a writer's room, someone reached for that exact name and pulled it back. 2003, a game names a dead world Malachor 5. 2014, Disney declares the entire expanded universe non-binding. 2016, in an animated series, a name resurfaces that officially nobody needed to use anymore. Malachor. No V after it now, just Malachor. But anyone who knew the old games felt the same pull at the back of the neck instantly. Let's be precise here, because this is where a lot of nonsense gets repeated. The honest state of the facts, the Malachor that Ahsoka and Ezra walk onto in Rebels in 2016 is a reuse of the old name in the new canon. And this is the crucial part. Canon has never, at any point, claimed that it's the same celestial body. We have 2 Malachors, one from Legends ripped apart by a gravity weapon, one from canon which we're about to meet, and the only hard link between them is a name and a gut feeling. But what a gut feeling. Lay the 2 side by side and the coincidence dissolves. Both are dead worlds, both are saturated to the core with the dark side, both house a superweapon that erases life on a mass scale in a single stroke. Both turn a catastrophe into stone and silence, and both feed on death. These aren't 2 rocks that happen to share a name. This is a writer in 2016 looking at an old meme and thinking, that world meant something, and I want that meaning back, even if I'm not allowed to tell the old story anymore. And here's the trap I'm deliberately not letting you fall into. It would be easy to say, obviously it's the same planet, the story just continues. It feels right. But feels right isn't the same as is canon. Literally, these are 2 separate worlds sharing a name and a shared fate. In spirit, it's the same cursed place. Which reading holds? We're saving that question. It's the turn this whole story is running toward, and answering it too early would ruin everything. First, we have to see what was built on this second Malachor, and it's more disturbing than a nod that kills fleets, because this time, the victims stayed standing exactly where they fell, forever. The crystal at the heart of the temple wakes. A light colder than any star crawls up the black walls. On the surface, they face each other. Jedi on one side, Sith on the other. Mid-lunge, mid-leap, mid-scream. And then the weapon fires. They don't die. That would have been merciful. They freeze. Flesh becomes rock. Motion becomes sculpture. An entire battlefield freezes to stone in the same fraction of a second. What's left isn't a mass grave, but something stranger. A forest of statues holding their own final moment for eternity. Fighters staring at each other in stone, forever 1 blade length apart. This is the great scourge of Malachor, and Rebels doesn't show it to us as a flashback, but as landscape. Ahsoka, Ezra, and Kanan walking millennia later between those petrified dead, not understanding at first what they're stepping on. The how matters as much as the what.
Millennia ago,
Long before the Empire, so far back that even the Jedi of the Clone Wars knew the place only from legend, the Sith built a temple on Malachor. Not a shrine, a pyramid, mostly hidden beneath the surface, and at its core, an enormous kyber crystal. You know kyber crystals as the heart of a lightsaber, small stones that focus energy. Now picture one that doesn't fit in a hand, but fills a chamber. Large enough not to focus a beam, but a wave. Not a weapon for a duel, a weapon to erase life on a mass scale. The counterpart to the mass shadow generator, mirrored with eerie precision. The Jedi caught wind of it and did what Jedi do. They attacked to stop it. A battle followed, and at some point in the chaos, the weapon fired. Whether by intent, by accident, or by the desperate arithmetic of a Sith who'd rather take everyone with him, canon leaves it open. What it doesn't leave open is the result. The wave didn't distinguish Jedi from Sith any more than the generator distinguished Republic from Mandalorian. It took all of them, both sides, in one instant. Do you catch the echo? A weapon that recognizes no friends. A battlefield where winners and losers share the same death. The same cruel principle in a different currency. There, gravity and a wound in the Force. Here, stone and an eternal silence. And that silence is the real horror. A massacre rots, decays, gets covered by sand. Malachor's scourge left monuments. The dead didn't disappear. They stayed, upright, weapons drawn. A stone audience for anyone who had the nerve to come here millennia later. A battle that never ended. The fighters are still standing, still waiting. They will wait forever. But the stone isn't the most disturbing part. Step back and ask, if an entire army of Jedi and Sith petrified here, in a battle large enough to justify a superweapon, why did nobody know? Why was this catastrophe in no Jedi history book? Why did Ezra have to walk onto it to learn it had happened at all? The field of statues stood for millennia. The strangest thing isn't the stone, it's that no one remembered. There's only one way to make a superweapon truly disappear. You don't destroy the weapon, you erase the place from memory. And that's exactly what the Jedi did to Malachor. Here, Star Wars does something rarer than you'd think. It lets the good guys make an ugly decision. After the Scourge, the Order concluded the world was too dangerous to be known at all. They declared Malachor forbidden, and then they went one step further, the step that makes me look up every single time. They removed the planet from their own archives. The Jedi archives are the memory of the Order, tens of thousands of years of knowledge, built on the principle that understanding is what protects you from darkness. And this Order, of all of them, tore a page out of its own library. Deliberately. Because the knowledge of how to build such a weapon and how to fire it could not fall into the wrong hands. As long as a record existed saying Malachor was there, someone could go looking. So they made the place unfindable. What survived were legends, half-truths, a name people muttered without knowing what it meant anymore. And here a circle closes that runs cold down my spine. At Malachor 5, it was forgetting through confusion. The truth blurred because different people wrote down different versions. Here, it's forgetting by design, not blurring, but erasure. Two mechanisms, the same result. What happens on Malachor vanishes from the memory of the galaxy. You can still see the scar thousands of years later in an almost comic detail. In the Clone Wars, an officer swears by Malachor. In Rebels, a smuggler spits the same name as an insult. Malachor had become a curse word, something you say without knowing why it carries weight. The name survived. The truth behind it didn't. That's what happens to catastrophes you bury instead of telling. They sink into superstition, into a dark sound with nothing inside it. The Jedi believed they'd made Malachor safe by forgetting it. That's the error. You don't make a place safe by ceasing to understand it. You only make it lonely. You leave it to the next person who stumbles across it, without warning, without any idea what they're walking into. And a place that feeds on death can't be erased anyway. It finds a way to remind you it's there, this time through ash. The most valuable contraband in this corner of the galaxy isn't spice or stolen kyber, it's ground bone. The pulverized remains of dead Force users, scraped from Malachor's Fallen, sold in small containers to people who know what to do with it. They call it the Ash of Malachor. Breathe it in and you see visions, the final moments of the beings whose dust you're pulling into yourself. And more, the ash amplifies the dark side in whoever inhales it. It makes you stronger. It shows you what was meant to stay hidden. The only price is drawing other people's deaths into your lungs, and a piece of your humanity along with them. Think about what that says about Malachor. The place doesn't just kill, it becomes a commodity. The catastrophe gets mined like ore. The petrified, forgotten dead come back as a drug for the greedy. Even as dust, Malachor still hands out power to anyone willing to pawn their soul for it. And here enters someone who understood exactly that. Long before Ahsoka ever set foot on Malachor, Darth Sidious was there. The future Emperor brought his apprentice Maul to this place, made him breathe the ash of the fallen, fed him the deaths of Force users long gone. Why? Sidious never did anything without a reason. He knew Malachor, he knew its power, and he used this graveyard as a teaching tool, a place to harden an apprentice in the dark side by forcing him to inhale death. That raises a question Rebels never fully answers, which is exactly why it lingers. How did Sidious know about Malachor? The Jedi had deleted the place from their archives, forbidden it, dissolved it into superstition. But the Sith never forgot. To them, Malachor wasn't a buried mistake, but hallowed ground, a temple of their ancestors, an inheritance. While the Jedi forgot, the Sith remembered. And that imbalance of memory is one of the quiet tragedies of the entire saga. The good deleted the knowledge that could have warned them. The wicked preserved it and honed it into a blade. And there lies the bitter irony of what came next. Into that very trap, the one the Sith knew so well and the Jedi had so thoroughly forgotten, the wisest living Jedi sent his young ward, with the best intentions in the galaxy. Master Yoda sent a boy to the one place the Order had deemed too dangerous to even know about. Knowledge of how to fight the dark. Not power, not a weapon, but knowledge. That's what Yoda sent Ezra Bridger looking for. And the place that knowledge led him to was Malachor. Stay with that decision a moment, because at first glance it makes no sense. Yoda, the keeper of centuries of caution, sends a half-trained boy to the one place his own Order sealed away millennia earlier. Does Yoda know where he's sending him? Or does even he no longer know what Malachor is because the Order buried it too well? Canon leaves it deliberately suspended. Either way, the irony stands. The wisest Jedi of the era sends his ward into a trap his Order sealed so thoroughly that it's no longer clear whether he himself still knows what's down there. As so often, the galaxy kept this knowledge in its darkest place, not its brightest. 3 came. Kanan Jarrus, the steady teacher who sensed something was wrong here. Ezra Bridger, young, hungry, wide open to exactly the temptation nobody had properly warned him about. And Ahsoka Tano, former apprentice of Anakin Skywalker, a woman who had left the Order long ago and never stopped fighting for it. They didn't just find the temple, they found someone already there, Maul. In exile, aged, half mad, and as dangerous as ever, right here where Sidious once made him breathe the ash of the dead. Maul saw in Ezra exactly what he needed, a young, pliable mind. He called him apprentice almost the moment they met, played the only honest guide in a nest of darkness. And Ezra, hungry for power to protect his friends, listened. That's the trap beneath the trap. Malachor is the dangerous place, but the real danger isn't the stone, the ash, or even the weapon in the temple. It's a voice that promises you exactly what you want most, and takes exactly what makes you human in return. Maul didn't need a superweapon to wound Ezra. Just patience and a willing ear. And while Maul circled the boy and Kanan felt the situation slipping away from him, Ahsoka was moving towards something nobody saw coming. A meeting she'd needed half her life to be ready for, and for which no life is long enough. 3 came for knowledge. 1 will leave blind. 1 will leave as a traitor in a friend's clothes. And 1 won't leave at all. She heard his voice before she saw his face, and the voice belonged to a dead man. Ahsoka stood facing Darth Vader, the Emperor's enforcer, the butcher of the Jedi Order, the man in the black mask. Their blades crossed, and somewhere in the den, a piece of his mask broke away, and through the crack came a voice she knew better than almost any other. The voice of Anakin Skywalker, her master. The man who had trained her, protected her, shaped her, and whom she had believed dead. Stop here, because to feel the weight of it, you need to know what Anakin was to Ahsoka. Not just some teacher, the master who believed in her when the Order dumped her on him as a burden. The one who gave her the nickname Snips, who led her into the chaos of the Clone Wars and pulled her back out. And when the Order falsely accused her and let her fall, it was Anakin who brought her the truth. Too late to save her faith in the Order, never too late for her faith in him. Ahsoka left the Jedi, Anakin didn't. Then their paths split, and she never learned what became of him. Now she knows. He's this. The thing in the mask, the man who gave her a life, is the man who wants to take her life. There are few moments in Star Wars this cruelly personal. Not a duel between good and evil, not an anonymous blade against an anonymous enemy. A woman looking into the transformed corpse of her father, because that's what Anakin was to her, and having to understand that rescue is no longer possible. And the worst part, some part of her wants to try anyway. Then I will die with you, she tells him. She means it. She's ready to stay in this cursed place beside whatever is left of her master, rather than lose him a second time. While Ahsoka's heart tears itself apart, everything around her goes under. Maul had turned the whole expedition into his own game long ago. In the scuffle, he blinds Kanan, takes the teacher's sight, a wound he'll carry the rest of his life. Then he flees with what he came for. The temple, whose superweapon had come within moments of firing again, collapses as Ezra rips the Kyber crystal holocron from the obelisk at the last second. Malachor breaks a second time, not by a gravity weapon this time, but by the greed of everyone who believed they could take its power for themselves. And in the middle of that collapse, in smoke and fire, Ahsoka stands facing Vader at the edge of a chasm, and the camera leaves her there. She doesn't reach for him. He doesn't reach for her. Two figures divided by a crack in the ground and by everything broken between them. Then the curtain falls. Ahsoka vanishes into the smoke, and the show doesn't tell us whether she walked back out. For the audience, that was the end for years. Ahsoka Tano entered on Malachor, vanished on Malachor, presumed dead. The place that swallowed fleets and petrified armies now seemed to have swallowed the most beloved character on the show. Everyone believed she died. They were wrong, but the truth is stranger than any death. What if she didn't die? Because someone pulled her out of the moment of dying. Not saved, not healed. Pulled out. Lifted from the very second she should have fallen, seized by a hand that reached through time. That's how Ahsoka Tano came back, and to understand how, you have to walk into one of the boldest places Star Wars ever invented. A place that isn't on any star chart, but between everything. The world between worlds. Picture a space of pure darkness, threaded with glowing pathways running in every direction. Every path is a window, and every window opens onto a moment in history, past, future, any instant that ever happened or ever will. You can hear the voices of other times through them. You can, very carefully, reach through. It's the most vulnerable point in the entire structure of the Force, a place where time itself becomes touchable. The Jedi guarded that knowledge like a weapon, because it was one. Ezra found a doorway, and through one of those windows, he saw the moment he'd never been able to forget. Ahsoka on Malachor, facing Vader, in the smoke at the edge of the end. He saw what was about to happen, and he did what anyone would do given the chance to save someone they love from death. He reached through and pulled her out. Tore her from the exact second she should have died, across to where Vader could no longer reach her. Think about the mechanics, because they're vertiginous. Ahsoka doesn't die because she was removed at the moment of her death, lifted out of time before the blow landed. To the galaxy, she was gone for years, presumed dead because she literally never returned from that instant into the normal timeline. She hadn't died, she had been taken out. A paradox told with breathtaking nerve, the death everyone counted as certain was never carried out because someone cut it out of reality at the last second. And here the show reveals its full wisdom. It doesn't settle for a cheap miracle. Ezra wants to take Ahsoka with him, just pull her over into his own time and keep her. And Ahsoka, having just escaped death, says no. She understands what Ezra's grief won't let him see. You can't rewrite time without tearing apart everything that followed from it. She has to go back, not into death, but back into her own thread of time, to go on from there to wherever she's meant to go. That's the core of what won't leave me alone about this sequence. It isn't a trick for bringing back a favorite character. It's a woman who leapt off the blade of death and still had the courage to step back into the time where she's mortal, because she understood that a stolen life is no life. Ezra offered to cheat history, Ahsoka declined, and that voluntary return into danger is more heroic than any duel. She went back, not into the smoke of that moment, but into a later one she could walk away from. And then something quiet and unsettling happened at once. She descended. Guided by Morai, the mysterious owl that watches over her, Ahsoka went down into the depths beneath the ruined temple, down into Malachor, back to the beginning of everything. And in that descent, the image of a single woman climbing down into the guts of this cursed world, to the place where 3 catastrophes began, comes the question that turns the whole story on its head. She went down to where it all began, but when exactly did it begin? And did it begin here? Or on another world with the same name, millennia earlier, with a different descent into the same darkness? We've told this entire story around one name, Malachor. over and over as if it were obvious what we're talking about. But canon never said it's the same Malachor. Let that sit for a moment, because it pulls the floor out from under everything we've built. On one side, Malachor 5, torn apart by a gravity weapon, a wound in the Force, a graveyard of the Mandalorian Wars, exists in Legends, the old history, declared non-binding. On the other, Malachor, a Sith temple, a petrified army, the place where Ahsoka faced Vader, exists in canon, the valid timeline. And the only hard demonstrable bridge between the two is a shared name, nothing else. Not one line of canon ever says this is the same celestial body as the old Malachor 5. The name was taken up, the identity was left open, on purpose.
This is the point where I deliberately didn't let you jump to a conclusion earlier, because there are two honest readings here, and both are disturbing in their own way. The literal reading says two different worlds. Disney took a name loaded with meaning from the old games and stuck it on a new planet because it carried weight, because it struck exactly the right dark chord with the fans. On this reading, the whole resemblance isn't a continuation of a story, but an echo, a deliberate quotation, and honestly, that's eerier than it first sounds. Because it means when the storytellers needed a new dead world with a new superweapon, they instinctively reached for that exact name, as though the name itself demanded the role, as though Malachor could be nothing other than a place where armies die and history disappears. The other reading, the one your gut offers, says it's the same cursed place, the same world, its history reassembled after the old one was deleted. On this reading, Malachor survived the greatest act of forgetting of all, the erasure of an entire canon by a corporate decision in 2014. Legends was declared invalid, and Malachor came back anyway, with the same nature, the same darkness, the same purpose. As though you couldn't delete this place even from outside the story. Do you see what's happening? Whichever reading you choose, both lead to the same unsettling truth. Whether it's literally the same rock or only the same name, Malachor is a place the galaxy can't get rid of. You destroy it, you forget it, you strike it from the archives, you declare its entire plane of existence invalid, and it comes back. Always with the same face. Always as the place where death gathers and memory dies. If it's the same place, what was it cursed 3 times for? And if it isn't, why did the galaxy, twice, across millennia, choose the same name for the same catastrophe? What if Malachor isn't the place where catastrophes happen, but the reason they repeat? Turn the whole story around. So far, we've treated Malachor as a stage, a patch of rock where, by bad luck, terrible things keep occurring. But lay the 3 catastrophes side by side, and a pattern emerges that's too precise for coincidence. First catastrophe, a superweapon in the planet's core, all sides dying together, the planet breaking apart, the truth dissolving into contradictory reports, forgotten. Second, a superweapon at the heart of a temple, all sides petrifying together, the battlefield freezing, the truth deleted from the archives, forgotten. Third encounter, the same weapon nearly fired again, the temple collapsing a second time, a heroine vanishing in a way the galaxy reads as death, another erasure. The same 3 ingredients, every time, a weapon that kills in mass, death frozen into permanent form, shattered planetoids, petrified warriors, a collapsed temple. And then, without fail, the forgetting. This isn't a place where things happen. This is a place with a nature. And that nature has an appetite. I said it earlier, almost in passing, and now it returns with full weight. Malachor feeds on death. Don't take it as metaphor, take it literally. The wound in the Force, fed by the simultaneous death of thousands of Force users. The petrified army, death preserved in stone so it can never disappear. The ash of the fallen, death mined and resold so it can pull more people into the dark. At every stage, death isn't concluded but stored, kept, passed along. Malachor never lets death fully die. And maybe that's exactly the explanation for the forgetting. Maybe the memory disappears not despite its nature, but because of it. A place that hoards death, that turns it into merchandise and into a weapon, is a place the living can't bear to know. So they push it away. The Jedi delete it from the archives. The chroniclers smudge who carries which guilt. The galaxy turns it into a curse with nothing inside. Not because they forget it, but because they have to forget it in order to keep living. But repression isn't healing. A place you forget instead of understanding simply waits for the next one who arrives without warning, without the faintest idea what they're stepping onto. Revan found it and built a trap. The Sith found it and built a temple. Ezra found it because Yoda sent him.
to a place whose danger the Order had buried so thoroughly that not even the wisest master seemed to fully know it. 3 times the same spot deleted its own history, and 3 times someone came back, as if the place itself had called. Why have storytellers separated by decades, who never coordinated, instinctively given this one name the same role again and again? That's the question that remains, and it leads out of the fiction.
Somebody invented a dead world called Malachor 5 in 2003, where a weapon swallowed entire fleets. 13 years later, in a different team, in a newly built canon, somebody reached for that exact name and made it a grave again, a superweapon again, a place of forgetting again. Whether by full intent or from an instinct they could barely name themselves, they came back to the same image. Maybe that's the truest thing about Malachor. Not whether it's 1 rock or 2, not whether Revan or Surik nodded, but that Malachor as an idea has a gravity stronger than any continuity, any corporate decision, any reboot. You can delete the history, the place comes back. You can declare the canon invalid, the name finds its way home. Malachor is the wound Star Wars itself won't let heal, because some stories need a grave that never quite closes. And if you take one single thing from all of this, take this: the real weapon of Malachor was never the mass shadow generator. Never the kyber crystal in the temple, not the gravity, not the stone, not the ash. The real weapon was the forgetting. 3 times countless beings died in this place, and 3 times the cruelest consequence wasn't the death. It was that the galaxy afterward acted as though nothing had happened. The fleets nobody mourned, because nobody could even agree on who killed them. The petrified army nobody knew about, because the place was torn out of the books. The heroine everyone thought dead, because her thread simply snapped in the smoke. Every time, it wasn't just murder. It was the erasure of the fact that murder had occurred. That's what truly curses a place. Not the blood, the silence afterward. Some places bury their past, Malachor digests it, and somewhere beneath broken stone in the dust of the forgotten, it waits patiently for the next one to come learning how to fight the darkness, in the graveyard of everyone who tried before.